Los Angeles. This is Brooks Melchior for Sports by Brooks on Fancred. We've got a huge show, got a ton of guests, but I want to get to some things. One thing that I just tweeted out, some new information that I've just learned in the last few minutes about the situation at USC. What I've learned is there has not yet been made clear to the people who are trying to get that head coaching position and who have been engaged by the USC administration. It has not been made clear to them yet. And these are people who USC has talked to. Hasn't been made clear yet to them that Helton is definitely back. All right. Now, I've also learned today that Clay Helton has been out recruiting. In fact, he's in recruits' homes today and was yesterday. So if that's the case, you can't imagine with signing day coming up in 16 days that he wouldn't be back theoretically. So those are key points. The other key point that I've learned, and this is new information that you haven't heard about, and if you're a USC fan, welcome to the show. We do it every weekday, and this is the kind of information you're going to get, not just about SC, but around the country. You're not going to get this anywhere else. You got to come to this show to get this kind of information. 9 o'clock Pacific every day. The other crucial piece of information about the USC situation right now is Graham Harrell. Graham Harrell, offensive coordinator, of course, and USC has had a great resurgence with the offense. Slovis, all that. And he's got a great pedigree. I learned today that Harrell has interviewed for 2 head coaching jobs. One of them specifically is the University of Texas, San Antonio. Let me repeat that. Harrell is interviewed for 2 jobs, head coaching positions. One of them is the University of Texas at San Antonio. I don't know what the other one is. I also understand, and this has been speculated about, that Tom Herman wants him at Texas as the offensive coordinator. That very well could happen. I also have been told in the last 24 hours that Joe Brady, obviously LSU guy, might be in play there, but that would be unbelievable. I heard that from a single source, and I don't know what to think about it. So that's what's going on with USC. I mean, it's been reported that Harrell's gone. And if that's the case, all right, if that's the case, I don't know what to say, USC fans. I really don't know. The one caveat here is the people that I've talked to who are involved with people who are on the outside, who USC has engaged about their head coaching job, the people that I've talked to, they have not been definitively told of Helton's status. They haven't been told anything. And I have a feeling there's some meetings going on right now, conference calls, whatever. But it is inexplicable that you would bring Helton back. Now, outsiders, people who aren't SC fans, or if you're not following the situation, you may look at the record and say, wow, they played better and solid and all this stuff. It's been the same thing every year. I don't want to relitigate that. I think the 2 things to look at right now, beyond it's business as usual for the program, sloppy, unbuttoned, problematic, all over the place, red flags, right? But directly, objectively, you're going to lose Graham Harrell no matter what. I can tell you that now. Not that that's a big secret, but I just gave you specifics about the Texas San Antonio interview. All right? That's number 1. Number 2, you've got a historically bad recruiting class, and signing day is 2 weeks away. All right? And so now you've got guys like Bruce Feldman. No one in college football media has more credibility than Bruce Feldman, and he lives in LA and is obviously close to the program. And so now you have him coming out and all but confirming that Helton's going to be back. My sense is there's a possibility USC may just do nothing here. But the problem with that, and I just tweeted it, if you don't do anything, you're going to have a cloud of speculation over that program, not from the media, but from opposing coaches. Carol, if you're watching, Mike, if you're watching, maybe you forgot, but you can bet that the people who are taking your recruits out of Southern California and have been doing so, Southern schools of all things. I mean, I can understand to an extent a few going, they've always gone to the Northwest, whatever it is in your conference. That's happened. That'll happen once in a while. But now the SEC, the ACC, they're coming in. They're taking your players, right? And you can bet that the people who USC and Clay Helton and company are recruiting against, those guys are going to tell the recruits, wait a minute, look at all this speculation and nobody's confirming anything. So if you're not going to come out and confirm and at least do something, I'm sure they've thought to themselves, well, what are we supposed to do? Are we supposed to come out and say we're not firing him? Yes. How about that? Yes. Or, I'm sure Jimmy Sexton, his agent, Helton's agent right now, if he's ever going to do it, is trying to get a contract extension. And that might be what's happening right now, believe it or not. Not because they want to keep him around long. It's all for recruiting. Every single thing that we're hearing about in college football in coaching situations, everything that we've heard about in coaching situations, dating back for as long as I can remember, it all comes down to recruiting. I shouldn't say that. I think that really Nick Saban, I've got to pinpoint this. I've got to think about it. But if you think back to college coaches, guys, Nick Saban, more than anybody, I think pioneered the idea of the head coach. I mean, people talk about head coach as a CEO, Bear Bryant, John McKay, right? CEO. Nick Saban changed that sort of dynamic. He became the guy as the lead recruiter and the guy on the phone and the guy doing it 24/7. And then you've got Urban Meyer, same thing. Not a coincidence. They're at the top of the profession. Dabo Sweeney, right? That's the difference. And we talk to people about that on this show, college football experts, NFL guys. So when you look at the USC situation, I think there's a disconnect there. Maybe they're not aware of that, but you have to have a guy in there who is like that. I know you're USC, but give me a break. Everything has to be done in terms of accounting for recruiting. And if you have a recruit in a home today with Clay Helton sitting there, and there's no confirmation that he's coming back, and this has been speculated about for 2 years, and more specifically, you've got an assistant coach or a head coach from another program who last night told this same recruit who's speaking to Clay Helton today, this is a hypothetical, but I know Clay Helton is recruiting people right now. I've been told that. I've confirmed that today. You can bet there are going to be recruits who will tell Clay Helton, hey, wait a minute, I just talked to this coach. He said it's still up in the air. Are they going to make an announcement? Right? That's the situation we're talking about here that USC is caught in. And now you've got Graham Harrell leaving, definitely leaving. And you've got a guy who a lot of people are ascribing, and why wouldn't they, to the resurgence of the USC offense, because Clay Helton hasn't exactly been an offensive genius himself. The success of the offense of USC, you go back to Darnold, but it's been a function of the talent, or now the coordinator, not Clay Helton. It's been despite Clay Helton. I mean, you've got Slovis buried there, and I recognize he was not a highly talented recruit, but how is it that you've got a guy like Slovis who's like 19th string, and it takes a catastrophe of injuries to get past Helton's guys? And we're like, who's this guy? Flash in the, no, he's not a flash. No, he's just really good. To me, that right there, that's confirmation why Helton shouldn't be there. So that's what I'm hearing. Also want to update you on Auburn quickly. Have heard again, Malzahn, 50-50 if he's coming back. If he is not coming back, it'll be because he's leaving to go to Arkansas. Malzahn will leave. He won't be fired. He'll be leaving to go to Arkansas. On Florida State, I actually had a source tell me today. I mean, we've got Mike Norvell there. I think he's the leader. We got to wait till after the conference championship game, which is going to be an epic game, epic matchup, rematch. But Norvell, probably the guy at Florida State. If he's not, I actually heard the name Bob Stoops today from a good source. And like you, I made my source repeat. Bob Stoops? What? He's still in the mix? Well, anything's possible. Anything's possible, especially in college football coaching circles, right? Ole Miss, I think I told you this name yesterday, Pete Golding, Alabama assistant. Keep an eye on him. I don't think LSU is going to lose Aranda. I don't think Aranda is going to go to Ole Miss. And I'm very interested to see what happens with Joe Brady. That's going to be fascinating. Okay, let's bring on Mike Girardi from NFL Network. I appreciate him waiting on the line. I really appreciate it. And we'll take some of your comments and maybe some of your questions later on these job situations. But now we're going to talk some NFL with one of the best, and I do mean the best, Mike Girardi. Mike, I can't thank you enough for hopping on, man. Thanks a lot.
I appreciate you having me.
So let's talk a little bit about the Patriots, because, of course, we always talk about the Patriots and what happened with the Texans. That was a fascinating on-field situation, but I think just as fascinating off-field. And so a lot of times when guys don't shake hands on the field or there's things that go on, interactions, it's not that big of a deal. What's your assessment of what went on between O'Brien and Belichick, and if there is anything that's more to that?
I would say the first thing about that is that Bill Belichick is probably one of the sorest losers that I've ever been around. Right. I mean, you see his post-game press conferences where he can't utter a full sentence, after a loss to 10 or 12 questions, and there's that uncomfortable silence. And I would also say, look, the Bill O'Brien connection to Nick Caserio, and of course trying to hire Caserio this offseason to be their GM, and Jack Easterby, who was sort of the pastor here with the Patriots, but it was involved much higher up than that, also going to Houston. I think that left some bad feelings. And but mostly I think it's about Bill he just can't take losing. He didn't like the way his team played, and that at the end of the day, I want to get out of here as fast as possible. I want to talk to my team, and then I want to get on that flight home and try to figure out how we can be better for Kansas City.
Is there an extra, though, layer of that sense of betrayal because of O'Brien's affiliation with the Patriots, obviously, or is that not a factor?
No, I think anybody who leaves New England and goes somewhere else and then starts competing with Bill, that's a hard relationship to manage, right? So I think that definitely exists, and I think that certainly knowing that Caserio was under contract for one more year has to bother Bill, does bother them all the way up to the top of the organization with Robert and Jonathan Kraft.
Right. So let's talk now about Tom Brady and the situation with him, because he had kind of an extraordinary press conference a few weeks ago against the Eagles. The Pats are 9-1, and he's not happy. Right. And it's interesting, and I wonder if you think this is a coincidence, that as long as he's been there, they've always had patchwork teams. They've always had guys who had utility players on the field. But this offense that the Patriots have right now, it might not be the best offense they've ever had under Brady. In fact, it might not even be close. Is there a sense from Brady maybe that he's being perhaps sandbagged a little bit, or at least not prioritized to the extent by Belichick as he has been in the past when providing those offensive guys around him, those weapons?
To me, this all comes back to not having a contract that goes beyond this year. And the thought, for a number of off seasons now was that extension was going to come and it was going to be for multiple years. and was going to allow Tom to finish his career here. And 2 years ago, he's the MVP. Well, 2 years ago, I think it was. And what does he get for a contract extension? Nothing. He gets added incentives that he doesn't even reach that year. And then this year, he was making $15 million, and they're in training camp, and he still doesn't have that contract. And we're all, it's going to come. It's going to come. And it doesn't come. And in fact, some people reported that he told them he wasn't going to Detroit and he wasn't going to Tennessee, where they are having joint practices this summer, unless he got something done to his deal. Well, they gave him the $8 million bump, but as part of that give and take, there was the no franchise, and that was he who demanded the no franchise. So we're in a place we've never been before, and now as the season plays out, right, you're looking at this isn't the greatest offense ever. He's playing with young guys. They have to make the trade for Mohamed Sanu, and Sanu is now dealing with an ankle problem.
Right.
They don't have a tight end replacement for Rob Gronkowski. It's just been this whole thing that's built up. And I think you're seeing some of that frustration, and I don't think it's just with the offense. I think it's with the entire situation.
What's your read on Josh Gordon? What happened there?
I think they thought he couldn't play anymore. It just felt like he couldn't run that well anymore. And I think, look, they're not doing him dirty. They know what he's been through, but I think there was some concern about commitment level, some potential tardiness issues. And I think that as that wore on, they were just like, we can't rely on this player going forward. So we're going to make the move now. We're going to insert N'Keal Harry into the lineup. We're going to play Jacoby Myers more and hope that by the time we get to January, those guys are somewhat on the same page with Tom Brady.
When you're talking about the Brady contract situation, is that Belichick? I mean, does Kraft play an active role in that, or is that Bill telling Kraft what to do, or is there somebody else in the background? I mean, why are we in this? Because as a non-Patriots guy, just from the outside, you're talking about one of the most important, famous, significant players in my lifetime, and he's playing for a contract, and he just won the Super Bowl again. And there is such a profound disconnect, at least for me personally, because, of course, we're in this era of free money for players to a certain extent and rewarding players to a certain extent. And I recognize that Belichick's success is really, really grounded in getting rid of guys before, perhaps. He'd rather be wrong and have them play well for another year or two. But how is it that this could be going on with Tom Brady?
For the longest time, I think all of Brady's contracts were done with the Crafts. And I don't,
And not Don Yee. Was Don Yee involved?
Well, yeah, sure. Don Yee was involved, but I think that Bill's influence on what Tom got was never as great as it is now. And I think, but to put that all on Bill now, I think is unfair, because I think this is a conversation they've had at a higher level with the Crafts. And I think they look at the scenario, and even though it was just a couple years ago where they said, Jonathan Kraft said, he has earned the right to decide when he's done. He can basically name his price for us. That they're looking at it now as last year you were a 41-year-old quarterback, and yes, we won the Super Bowl, but maybe they saw a little bit of decline. And don't get me like he's fallen off the cliff. I don't want to hear that nonsense, but they see things that we don't see. I can watch the tape. I can look at the 22s, but they see something that I don't see. Or maybe they know he's managing something. He's dealing with a right elbow thing that's been going on for about 6 weeks now. And maybe they look at it and say, well, 5 years ago, we didn't have this problem.
Right.
Now 42. This is what happens. We're in an uncharted territory with this situation and with the quarterback playing at this level at this age. And I think that Bill would like to go year to year. And I think that the Crafts are now on board with the idea of going year to year because, look, he's 20 years in the league, and he's been very fortunate. He takes wonderful care of his body, but he had the 1 year with the torn ACL at the beginning of the season. But otherwise, he's played through some stuff, but has had nothing major. And I don't know. I just think, you got to factor all that stuff in when you're looking at Tom and how you want to proceed going forward. I don't think they just want to write him out a check for 2 years and $60 million guaranteed, and then, find out that this elbow thing is something long-term and he's never going to have the same zip, or he's got a knee problem, whatever it is. I think they just don't want to put themselves in that spot.
It's such a fascinating situation. And then when you add in that, especially from the outside, because your guys are there, so you really have a much better idea of what's going on. But when I see that Netflix situation, and the house situation, all that stuff. You're thinking to yourself, it looks like a duck, it quacks like a duck. But Brady is a guy who has a thought process, a mindset that I think is very different than most people. And so, like in the Netflix case, do you think that he really does believe that there isn't a connection there, or maybe there's some passive aggressive going on there because of the situation he's in this year?
I thought it was a little disingenuous.
Right.
And when he was questioned about it finally, he turned, I'm sure everyone's seen the clip. He turns the tables on the reporter.
Right.
He talks about how you just
goes on offense.
Yeah, you make it what you want to be. If he was really upset about it, if he really thought that they had done him wrong or that there was no connection, I think he would have called out the people that did it. And he didn't do that.
That's it. Yeah. That's it.
So to me, that's where I think they did him dirty a little bit, from what I was told. But he didn't turn it on them, and he could have. Right. And instead, he turned it on the reporter, and I thought that was a little bit low budget on his part.
Now I'm glad I'm talking to you. And of course, we have other guys on like yourself up in the New England, Boston area. You're a national guy, of course, but that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that somebody screwed up in his entourage, or somebody didn't show him something, or didn't make clear with a green screen, whatever it was. But from the outside, you were like, wow, how could he react in that way? We're visiting with Mike Giardi of course, NFL Network. And you brought something up that, I don't think a lot of people are mentioning, but in the context, again, of the Patriots, how can we not keep talking about the Patriots? You have to. Yeah. And as we go towards the playoffs, as we go to the Super Bowl, I think about what happened to the Rams and that definitive masterpiece on defense by Bill Belichick. Now you're in a situation, and you've got a Jared Goff type of statuesque offense, right? Yeah. But now you've got the Deshaun Watsons of the world. You've got, of course, a Russell Wilson sitting there, Lamar Jackson being the greatest example. Do you think that is and this is applicable to everybody, but is that the one thing that could be the chink in the Patriots' armor defensively, to have someone with that kind of dynamic capacity that we've really never seen to this extent in the NFL across more than one team?
Well, I know with the Lamar Jackson situation, I think if you follow the league and you read the quotes coming out before the games and then you talk to the guys after the games, I think the one thing that stands out to all the defenders is you can't prepare for that. You can see it on tape. You can see what the speed looks like, the physicality looks like, but you can't duplicate it on scout team. You can't duplicate it during practice. And then all of a sudden you have this guy who runs a 4.29 40 or whatever it is with these long arms, and he rides the running back so perfectly, and then the ball comes out and he's following him. You have all these different things. And then, of course, pulls it out of the belly and then flips it 55 yards down the field with a flick of the wrist at some weird arm angle. But that's really hard to defend. I know in talking to Mark Ingram after the Patriots game, he said, you know how many times that I have the ball in my hands and I'm getting to the second level, the linebacker level, and they're all looking at Lamar because they'll still think Lamar has the ball. You're that hyper-focused on Lamar because he can do it like that. Wow. And he said, and all of a sudden I'm 5 yards past the line of scrimmage, and I'm running by the guy, and he's looking in the backfield, and I have the ball. He's like, it makes our life so much easier as running backs. It opens up things that haven't been there before. Obviously, Deshaun is a little bit different than Lamar in the sense that he doesn't really want to run. He can run, obviously. He's a tremendous athlete. He's got that speed, the 4.5 speed. But he's now scrambling to make plays down the field with his arm. And you've seen his growth in particular this year. They've gotten him a little bit better protection. He's now more than a year removed from the ACL. And he looks like he is going to be around for a long time and be someone to reckon with. So those guys are special guys. I would be curious, now that the Patriots have seen both those teams, how Bill would respond and how that defense would respond, having seen him, played him, got the speed, understand what it's going to be like. I mean, obviously there'll be new wrinkles every time you play a team, but I'd love to see what he's scheming in his head for that next time they see him.
Innovation, man, and finding a way, that whole concept of utility, I think, whether it's with the players or with the scheming, I think is what really sets him apart in some ways. And I think his devotion to a pragmatic evaluation of a player, and I think we've got the two best examples you could ever have this year in the way Brady has dealt with it, and Brady kind of made his own bed because he had been doing this similar to what we've got right now in the past. So if you're Bill, what are you going to say? I mean, we kind of done this before, Tom. But then also you've got a guy like Antonio Brown, which when you think of the Patriots and you win that much, and wow, they do it by the book. And well, kind of, they do it with talent. And we need talent no matter what. And the fact that they would do that, I think really gives you insight into Bill Belichick. Am I reading that right? Or is there something else at play?
Well, I think you look
with Brown and those guys.
Yeah, one of the things I guess I'm not taking issue with you, but it's sort of been a narrative is that.
Go ahead, by the way.
Push back. That they ignored the receiver position and they ignored the tight end position in the offseason. And I think it's unfair. They made a strong run on Adam Humphries. In fact, ended up offering more money than Tennessee did. But he had initially committed to them. And when they came back with more money, he said, I'm going to honor my commitment. Now, he's a Southern kid, and maybe the Boston market wouldn't have been the best thing for him anyway. But they chased him. They chased Cole Beasley. And for whatever reason, Cole Beasley chose Buffalo. And maybe they offered more money. I don't quite know the details of what was offered to Beasley. But again, they tried to address it. Jared Cook, they pitched. Belichick and Josh McDaniels went to see Jared Cook and try to convince him to come here. But that was when Rob Gronkowski was still on the roster. And this is the other part, I guess, that gets lost because Gronk is so beloved around here, is that by delaying his announcement to when he did, to the owners' meetings in Arizona, the first wave of free agency was done, and really the second wave of free agency was done. There was no one left. And so Jared Cook's looking at it going, well, I can go to the Saints and be the number one tight end, or I can go to New England and there's some uncertainty here, and maybe I'm the 2, or maybe Gronk's not there at all, and maybe I don't want that either. You know, at least if I'm going to New Orleans, Michael Thomas is someone who demands doubles all over the place, then my life might be easier there. So they did try to do something. It didn't work. Gronk on the tight end situation certainly impacted how they could operate. And then I think with Antonio, Belichick has loved that player for a long time. He's an elite player. Bill would rave about him every time the Patriots played the Steelers. And I think when that opportunity came, Bill got a little almost out of his own guidelines.
Okay.
He gave him a great deal of money. You know, I know they have a great relationship with Rosenhaus. So I'm sure they asked Rosenhaus if anything was going to come up. And Rosenhaus was convinced that nothing was. And then 3 days later, the whole story comes up.
Man, when you lay it out that way, when you lay it out with the offseason and how Gronk, you could argue whether it wasn't thinking or he's being selfish or whatever happened, you lay out that situation that way. And the big dynamic that I know you guys are reporting on, but is Rosenhaus and the fact that he has that relationship, he has players and has for many, many years with the Patriots. So if you're Belichick, you can you worked with him before, he's been reliable, you would think. Now it kind of makes a lot more sense. But before we let you go, Mike Giardi, of course, is with us from NFL Network. Before I let you go, big news, of course, out of Carolina with Ron Rivera, which to me is another fascinating situation. And it's something that I've really followed or tried to as close as I can out here in Los Angeles. But the dynamic between Rivera and Cam Newton, and Newton plain injured, or how injured is he, or he's, you know, I mean, do you think Cam Newton played into this decision? Is Tepper making a statement about Newton at all? And what do you think Newton's future with the Panthers might be?
Yeah, I would be surprised if Cam is back there next year. I guess a lot will depend on who the next hire is. And clearly they want to get ahead of the hiring curve here. And in some ways did Rivera a solid. I know he said he was shocked by it, but at least now everybody knows there's no waiting. If you have an opening or you're thinking about having an opening and you like Ron is out there to be had now. But Tepper is very much involved in the analytics community, is big on that. I think it was pretty clear when Tepper even took over the team that Rivera's days were going to be short unless they had that Super Bowl run again. So when that didn't happen, I think Tepper was clear. I'm bringing in my people, right?
Right. Well, Jason Garrett, I mean, Jerry Jones saying Jason Garrett. Well, by the way, what's your thought on that? Jerry Jones saying Jason Garrett will be coaching some. Well, you just talked about analytics. We know he won't be in Carolina, you would think now, Garrett. But I mean, what's your read on Jerry? Why isn't he coaching the team?
Well, and then part he is, right? And I think that's I keep hearing, Lincoln Riley. They love Lincoln Riley. They were talking about it on the broadcast on Thursday about how he recruited the Stephen Jones's son and all this stuff. They have this relationship with him. They knew he was going to be a brainiac and a genius long before he became this guy. Now, I granted they can write out a bigger check than anybody. So if Lincoln Riley just wants dollars, then he could probably get as many dollars out of the Joneses as he wants. But he's not a puppet. And I think Jerry wants to be able to have his hand in all that stuff. And I think it's very hard for any established coach who's looking for more than just a payday to take, or someone like Lincoln, who's obviously incredibly well thought of and could probably have any NFL job he wanted that's going to be open this offseason.
Mike, thanks so much for dropping by. I know it's really, really busy time, especially today. So thanks so much, man. Thank you.
I love it, man. It was great to be on with you. Been following you for a long time.
I appreciate it. That's Mike Giardi, of course, of the NFL Network, does a great job, great information, great insight. The Patriots stuff today, I learned a couple of things, and I look at things differently now, having talked to him, Mike, because Mike is a guy who is on the inside with a lot of organizations like the Patriots. We'll talk about that in a bit, but I want to now jump over and talk some college football, something that we haven't brought up here this week, I think, yet, but I went off on Twitter today, talk about the college football playoff rankings and some other things with a friend of the show, phenomenal guy, John Walters of The Athletic joins us. And so we're going to run down what's going on in college football. Hey, John, thank you so much for dropping in, man. I really appreciate it.
Oh, Brooks, thank you for having me on. I got my hair cut. I am shaved. I'm so ready for today.
Did you get a hot shave at the thing, at the barber shop?
I did my own hot shave.
So, I want to talk to you about a couple of other things beyond the college football playoff. Mm-hmm. But I mentioned with the college football playoff rankings, something that I thought about and it got me thinking about the whole process is, if you look at the AP and you look at the coaches poll this week 19, the bottom 5 teams are identical. Mm-hmm. But when you look at the college football playoff rankings, and by the way, Oklahoma State is not in that group, nor is Kansas State, which is somewhat of a surprise. Mm-hmm. But in the college football rankings, I should say playoff rankings, suddenly Oklahoma State remains in the top 25 somehow. So when you look at that situation, how it could benefit Oklahoma or maybe even Baylor, mm-hmm. And you've got Joe Castiglione as one of the voting members of the College Football Playoff Rankings Committee, who's to say, even though he's recused from voting on Oklahoma, that you could have a guy like Castiglione twisting arms, mm-hmm. about Oklahoma State. That's really, really troubling to me. I mean, what are your thoughts on the committee's role and just the fact that they're voting on 25 teams gives them an opportunity to do that and manipulate the system?
Well, I mean, we both know there's 12, 13 people in that room. Certain personalities are more dynamic, more charismatic, more influential. When Barry Alvarez was there, I've got to imagine that he basically owned that room. So then you get to, again, everybody, even if they are as unbiased as possible, the very inherent nature of this system allows for people like us to wonder how transparent it is. It obviously benefits Oklahoma and Baylor to have Oklahoma State ranked. So there are always, what happens with these situations, I find, is that the people who are most toward the middle are the ones who get picked to be in these select clubs. And by the very nature of that fact, their opinions and their decisions are always going to go back toward the status quo in the middle. If you're a maverick or a renegade, even if you're a brilliant thinker, you're not in that room.
You're describing life, by the way. You're describing corporate culture, society. Isn't that what we're talking about?
Exactly.
So it mirrors society, I guess.
All the time. I mean, going back to what you just said with society, it's the maverick thinkers who create things because they couldn't work in a corporate structure. And it's the guys like Steve Jobs and Elon Musk who just can't work in that structure. And the same thing happens in college football. If you are too much of a maverick thinker, You don't belong at Alabama as a football coach. I mean, Mike Leach, whatever you want to say about him personally or how he treats the media, he came up with a way to win where he didn't have to have the best players to, even Art Briles did that. They manipulated the existing rules to their best benefit, but they are not the people who are going to be coaching at Notre Dame or Alabama because they're too scary.
Well, that's interesting. Because what we saw with Auburn and Alabama on the field, I think is somewhat similar to what you're referring to in how Gus Malzahn coached that game against Nick Saban. I don't think Gus Malzahn is a genius. He's not Vince Lombardi necessarily, but there were points in that game where he clearly outmaneuvered and outcoached and outmanipulated the game based on the rule book and whatnot. And of course, Gus's background is one of those. He's like one of those high school guys. Every year you hear about the guy that never punts, right? He never does this or he never does. He's one of those crazy guys in Arkansas high school football lore, Gus Malzahn. So talk about that game and what Gus Malzahn did in relation to Auburn, Alabama.
Well, let's go to the last series. I mean, after the missed field goal, the doink, Gus Malzahn, if he's thinking in the present, and he must have been, realizes that Alabama is going to have to exhaust their timeouts to get to fourth down. Now, what CBS, I believe it was Gary Danielson, but it may have been Brad Nessler, said at the top of the broadcast that should have stayed with you as a viewer was this: Alabama has the number one punt returner in the nation in Jalen Waddle, and Auburn has the lowest ranked punt defense in the nation.
Wow.
Gus Malzahn knows that, right?
Right.
And he's thinking, what can I do on fourth down? Because I know Alabama will not be able to call a timeout. So that play, the punt formation, he moves the receiver. You have to be quick thinking because Alabama, without having timeout to think about it, says send the defense onto the field. They're going for it. But that word doesn't get to Jalen Waddle, who's 35 yards downfield. CBS sort of missed this. If you watch the replay, CBS's cameras were on Jalen Waddle. He was making the sign of the cross to himself, and it was a poignant moment. I get it, but they missed the whole formation switch, and they missed Alabama running off the field. However, like, the beauty of it was Saban knew what was going on probably because he's smart, but
that's why he went crazy. And he went crazy.
Couldn't do anything about it. So they get stuck with 11 men on defense and Jalen Waddle 35 yards down the field, not realizing what's going on. Ball game, checkmate.
Right. And for me, that doesn't happen often enough. I mean, we're visiting with John Walters, of course, of The Athletic. That doesn't happen often enough where you have that sort of – look, I don't want to focus too much on the coaches when it comes to in-game coaching. Mm-hmm. But my sense is, and I just want to hear what you think in general. This season particularly, maybe because I'm getting older or maybe because I'm crazy or I just have too much knowledge about how everything works. The games this year, in general, you look at Ohio State, for instance, it feels like they played a 10-game preseason, mm-hmm. right? It feels like Alabama played a 9 or 8 game preseason. Forget about the non-conference. They're mm-hmm. conference opponents.
Right.
And it just seems like we have taken a step, but push back on me, slap me if I'm wrong about this. It seems like we have taken this step, and this is mirrored by what you said about the establishment in college football playoff, and it's always kind of been like that to a certain extent, but it's really enabled by ESPN now because ESPN is the college football playoff. They have put this system in place. They created it. But now what you have is that establishment in an Alabama where recruiting and the number of great 5 stars that you have. Look at Ohio State and what Urban Meyer, to me, that's what Urban Meyer did. He brought in so much more talent that it kind of has taken the coaching part, the in-game coaching part that you just kind of described with Gus Malzahn as an example, out of the game. We're getting all these lopsided games because the establishment owns this huge advantage in recruiting. What do you think about the overall picture that I kind of drew up for this season?
Well, you can't hide anybody anymore. I mean, first of all, we have, the 7-on-7 camps. We have these kids as freshmen and sophomores in high school, even as 8th graders. Basically, that's when they're doing their campus visits, and that's when the coaches are getting to know them. They're going to 2 or 3 campus camps in June which is what sort of like a freshman mixer used to be for us to get to know the girls at the girls' high school across from my boys' high school before classes actually start. This is the way coaching staffs and players get to know each other long before junior year.
Right. But wait a minute. Hold on. This is, you know what this is, though? This is a big thing that I'm going to bring up. And I know you know this. This is the parents. This has become such a kind of not a black market, but there's this undercurrent of and it's not necessarily in football, but the parents essentially marketing their kids from a very, very early age, and the parents buying into that thing because you have a whole industry pitching it to them. So Definitely. The parents now, but is this different now? Is this new? Is there more of an emphasis of what you speak, or is this something that's been going on for a long time?
I think it's been going on, but what, I hate to be the old guy who just keeps bringing up the internet, but the internet and the web, it's just the same thing. They have basically created a world where it's really hard to be a 6'5", 280 pounder who nobody knows about because you're in Montana.
The recruiting sites,
right?
Dude, you nailed it. You freaking nailed it, because I think that's one of the number one factors that nobody sees. Is how they created all of that.
Where's Alabama's quarterback from? Hawaii. Where was UCF's 13-0 quarterback from? Hawaii. Did you, like 20 years ago, 30 years ago, were Hawaiian kids getting off the island at most maybe going to California?
Right.
There was no way these places knew about these kids. So, and it's getting worldwide now. You're going to get more West African linemen coming in the way you
look at basketball.
Polynesian linemen. Yeah. So there's no place on earth where recruiters will not go. I think Notre Dame has a German defensive lineman coming in next year. He's like from Germany.
Wow.
So it's, wherever the talent is, they will find it. And the web gives coaches and players a much more easy way to find one another. Because if you think you're a pretty valid player who's playing in Nome, Alaska, you can get your tape out to Ryan Day in 10 seconds. He doesn't have to come see you.
Now, one of the things I didn't mention, and he's not necessarily one of my favorite guys personally, all right, but Mike Leach. Mm-hmm. How does Mike Leach, and they're not having a great year this year, but they have had, put it this way, Washington State. I was covering USC. I was doing the broadcast for USC. I was on every day at Los Angeles radio. So I was going to all the games. The Washington State teams that preceded Mike Leach were the worst college football teams in a Power 5 conference I've ever seen. They were a borderline, like a junior college, Washington State. And I know they upgraded the facilities and all that for Mike, but what he did in turning that program around is what, and I'm not his buddy, and I'm not a big fan of his. So it pains me to say this. It's one of the most remarkable coaching turnarounds or of a program in history. So what is Mike Leach doing? Because he doesn't have those athletes.
It's remarkable. And I've known two quarterbacks who played under Mike Leach, and they've told me in conversations that we in the media actually, we hail him as some super genius, but Mike Leach, and maybe this is his genius, he basically throws these guys in a room together and tells the seniors to teach the freshmen. He is not as hands-on as I think a lot of us like to think, but he did create a system that basically manipulated the idea of spacing out the field. It's like watching NBA teams or good college teams space out around the 3-point line. And the whole idea is to spread your players out to get a good shot.
Princeton basketball with Pete Carroll.
Correct. Absolutely. So what he's done is basically eliminate the need for running back or a tight end, spread the field. You watch these guys. It's funny because Washington, because they get to play them every year and maybe they're just more disciplined, holds them to lower points because they don't fall for anything. Like what Washington's defense does is knows these two guys are going to be 12 yards apart after they go out for like a 5-yard pass. You've got to split the difference. Don't give up anything big. But if you look year in and year out, Gardner Minshew led the nation in passing a year ago. Anthony Gordon is leading the nation in passing this year. It's a commitment to that style of play. They don't need a home run ball. A 5-yard pass play is not going to wow anybody, but it's better than a 5-yard run, and they can get that every day. So he's just got a commitment to a system, and those players buy in. He has had good linemen, and he knows what he needs. But it's funny, there were 2 games in Pullman this year where both teams scored over 50 points. So
Right.
it's
The UCLA game is unbelievable. That UCLA
Absolutely.
game.
I don't think I think the UCLA game was the most incredible football game I watched this year by far.
Visiting with John Walters of The Athletic, and of course, we don't have more than 4 teams in the college football playoff, which really underlines the ability of that committee to manipulate things with the bottom of the top 25 because they have their own top 25 rankings, which they should not have. They
Right.
should be getting 4 teams, especially when you don't have others receiving votes, when you have secret votes. It's absolutely ridiculous. Nothing's going to happen because it's ESPN's creation.
Correct.
And they're the highest profile. And we don't, I mean, what's your thought on the state of college football media? And I'm not denigrating a Bruce Feldman or a Thamel. I've got respect for them and the other guys that will break news.
Mhm.
But what about college football having really no high profile insiders? And it's really the only amongst the commercial spectator sports that are the major league sports. It's the only one that doesn't have that. Why do you think that is?
Because what you just said, I mean, it's the only sport that doesn't have a commissioner. So basically, Jimmy
Right.
Caro is the commissioner of college football. At
He is.
ESPN. I would argue that Brett McMurphy, speaking of renegades,
Brett McMurphy's a guy, yeah.
is that guy who isn't afraid to break anything and step on toes. And he's a good friend of mine. I respect the fact that he will, he's all about the information and breaking the news. And you look at how many stories ESPN has broken since Brett McMurphy left, as opposed to how many Brett McMurphy has broken since Brett McMurphy left. So I mean, when the network is also the league, it's pretty hard to be an insider.
Right.
Because, I remember once I was asked to do a story at the XFL when it first was coming out, and NBC was, basically bankrolling it. And my editor at Sports Illustrated said, okay, it's great that you have the XFL side. Can you get NBC side? And I just said, they're the same side. Like, that's the whole problem here. There's no contrarian position. So it's really hard to get, one of those insiders when everybody's operating on the same team.
It's funny because and it's always superficial discussion and debate about college football. And this is the way ESPN wants it. This is the way Fox wants it. It's all based on the ridiculous nature of whether it's the BCS, whether it was the polling in the past where we never really had a definitive champion. And that's being sold to us as, oh, that's great. We have, have no idea who the best team actually is, but we're going to play all these games. And now, of course, we've got the situation. It's just like everything else. There's manipulation, there's secrecy. It's absurd. And but all of the debate that comes out of that, right, that we actually do have that, well, wait a minute. That's what they claim. That's what they sell to us.
Right.
Instead of that debate, we should be debating, okay, who was behind the committee and why are they doing 25 teams? And why do we not have you absolutely? Here's the thing. If you're going to have guys who are current employees of schools as athletic directors, whatever it is, if you're going to have that, that's ridiculous on its face. That
Absolutely.
Conflict, it's a profound conflict of interest. Okay. If you're going to do that, we've got to know who they're voting for. All right.
I agree.
No. We're going to double down on the absurd nature, and nobody says a word. So if you care about the champion or who wins and all that stuff in the end, then you should want to know that. But I think college football fans are different than any other sport. And this is why they're so irrational when you criticize their team and their coach, because they're so used to the patty cake and the spoon feeding from the media, who truly is in bed and has denuded the sport from a journalistic standpoint, that they're not used to it. And to me, I don't want to get too serious here, but this is how you get a Joe Paterno. This is how Joe Paterno happens.
Well,
go ahead.
There's a lot of factors in that. College football, as you know, so many precincts are small town precincts, State College being one of them.
Deliberately so, I might add. I mean, Paterno did that on purpose.
Right. And so it's a lot easier to survive there with the media. You are the most important person in that region. And when you win, you're elevated to a status above human form
Right.
in those areas. So what you and again, we see this in politics too. Once someone is doing something that makes the fan base feel good about themselves, no one wants to know truth anymore. They just want to keep winning. They just want to keep that drug.
And so many are involved themselves financially, or they're planning of their lives. And it's such a social thing.
It's a social thing. So we go to these, I mean, I love watching that Jordan Hare Stadiums, on Saturday, and the whole, fervor and everything about it. At the same time, like looking out from a panoramic standpoint, you're like, what are we all so just rabid about? It's a football game, but our whole lives, that whole state, it's easy to sell it as this is such a wonderful thing that the whole state is behind it. And at the same time, it's like, take a step back. Like, what about your own life? Like, again,
your own identity. Yeah.
Who are you? Are you overweight? Are you happily married? Like, who cares? Auburn won. Like, there's that sort of mentality to it, which, again, that's what sports fans are about. I'm not proud of it. But
it's amazing. It's amazing that you bring that up, because that's exactly what. And when you say, I don't want to get too serious, I think that's the problem. Just because you're saying that doesn't mean that it's serious and it's not interesting or whatever. Basically, what we're doing is turning the mirror on ourselves.
Yes.
All right. And if you don't do that enough, you get what we have right now, which is really weird. And you know what I mean?
It's
Go ahead.
Really, really weird.
And I'm not talking football here.
So I hope this is in play.
Go ahead.
What we're talking about. So a friend of mine calls a couple weeks ago and says, who doesn't follow sports, why is this stupid NFL game preempting my 60 minutes by 12 minutes? And I wrote back to her and I said, listen, sports is a surrogate for prehistoric man's survival. In the old days, man survived by, protecting his turf, making sure he had enough to eat. And this way he could find a mate and survive and procreate and keep the species alive. Football is a surrogate for protecting your turf. Yeah. And it keeps a lot of violence outside of the society, because we're flashing that testosterone onto football. So if that's the price you have to pay for waiting 11 minutes for 60 minutes to come on, it's a small price to pay. But
it's
really,
an outlet for that.
Yeah, that's what football is. It's our surrogate for our visceral, primal feelings about getting our turf.
And if you look at the way it was invented with Walter Camp, he didn't invent it with the forward pass. It was all invented with war in mind, specifically.
Right. Trench warfare.
But it was mass play. Remember the flying wedge?
Right.
What you had before, the reason everybody was dying, and because I'm studying this right now too, the reason you would have 26 deaths in 1905 playing football, which is what happened in the United States, was there was no forward pass, and you didn't have to have a certain number of players on this line of scrimmage. So what you had 11 guys hooking up their arms, all in formation, charging into the ball carrier at the point of attack. And the other thing about football at that time was you didn't have a coach during the game. The coach was someone from the team, but they had no profile. No individual really had a profile. The guy who was made famous by this whole situation, and he started this game, he wrote the rules, he invented what we're talking about, is Walter Camp.
Right. And
he was the advisor for that team. And everybody knew that. Everybody knew that in the press. And now think about war, and think about when everything happened in World War I. How did that work? There were no identities or individuals, and it was this plotting thing where you were trying to get that ground and go straight ahead right into the brunt of the fire. And what I just described, how football originally was. And think about the generals behind the lines.
Right.
They're so far. Right. And that's Walter Camp. And that's how he designed it. So the people in the back would get all of the credit. And to a certain extent, that is that's the principle. I mean, Jerry Jones is Walter Camp to a certain extent. He is an unprecedented kind of figure with it. Well, not unprecedented. George Halas was somewhat similar, but but he's the only guy doing it out of all of the owners to a certain extent, having that high a profile. But it's amazing that you bring up these cultural, societal things because automatically, oh, it's going to be a tune out. The problem is because people don't they don't want to turn the mirror on themselves.
Well,
the fact that they're identified with a team, this identifies who we are.
Absolutely. I would argue that they may have been able to cut those deaths down in 1904 if they'd had a sideline medical tent, Brooks. I think that.
Yeah, it was the tent, I think, that they needed, right?
Yeah.
Actually, if they had thought of that, they would have loved to have had a tent back then. That would have been one of their things.
It would have been like a full-on match Army hospital tent. It's absolutely true. Like, this one thing, again, another non-sports fan I was talking to, I said, it's not a coincidence that these teams have uniforms and that these uniforms are
marching bands. That's war. Martial music,
war.
Marching bands comes from that era too.
Absolutely. It's, you can hate Johnny Damon when he's on the Red Sox and then you love him when he's on the Yankees because it's not about Johnny Damon. It's about what uniform he's wearing.
Good point.
And that's college football. That's sports. The people who put this all in play and are making money from it, they're not idiots. They have understood how to basically transcribe war into sport. And that's the same bloodlust, especially in football.
Yeah, this would be we should do like a Sports by Brooks Fancred extra or something and do a conversation on these kinds of things. I really appreciate it, John. Thanks for hopping on, man. This is great.
Thank you, Brooks. I always appreciate you having me on. Thank you very much.
That's John Walters of The Athletic. And boy, if you listen to the show, you watch this show, good Lord, you've heard me talk about some of those issues. I think the thing that's really missing right now is what he brought up. There's nothing wrong with the fact. There isn't anything wrong with the fact that, and understand what happens in Alabama, with the University of Alabama, the stadium, everybody's excited. They go to the games. They identify personally. They wear the gear. They wear the colors, right? That happens where you live. You're probably involved with that. If you're not, somebody is. That's the culture. What I didn't bring up to John, which I want to talk to somebody about this at some point, do an interview, because I think we should do more of these things because it's very instructive for me personally to know why are things the way they are sometimes. Why is this all happening? But stadiums. So I've been doing a lot of research on stadiums lately, and it is unbelievable the number of stadiums that are being built around the world. Yeah, there's stadiums being built here, but we have kind of a mature marketplace for stadiums because we've had these leagues, and it all started with Harvard in 1903 with Harvard Stadium. That's the prototype for every stadium we have today. It started with Harvard and that football stadium. But man, you look around the world, like in countries like Turkey, they're building these unbelievable stadiums that I didn't know about. But that's everywhere. And it says something, I think, about those countries, maybe not what it says about our country, but it's a fascinating study, to say the least. So speaking of fascinating, we're going to go up to the Bay Area and talk to one of my favorite individuals in the media in the world, Damon Bruce. It is an honor, a privilege, a thrill to have him on the show. Damon, I can't thank you enough for hopping on, man. This is great.
Well, you're being too kind. I've been such a fan of yours, and you've done my show so many times that this is the very least I could do, brother. It's good to see you. Good morning. Cheers to you and all your success.
Absolutely. 95.7 The Game in the Bay Area. Damon Bruce has been doing it forever up there. And so the first thing I want to jump into is football, of course, and talk to you about one of the more intriguing teams, I think, in the NFL, the Niners. And I mean, the Raiders, too, to a certain extent. But the Niners, to me, are, if not the biggest story in the NFL this year, they're among them. So what's your read on the Niners? What can we expect from the Niners, you think, going forward?
Brooks, I think they got as good a shot to go to the Super Bowl as anybody. Let's not talk about winning the Super Bowl, but representing the NFC, I think they can do it. They have a defense that is beyond legitimate any way you want to break it down or look at it. They've got that secret ingredient that all great defenses must have. You can get to the quarterback with 4. If you can get to the quarterback with 4, you can play poker in this league with just about anybody. They have been in more competitive games. They have trailed by less than 10 points, less than any other team in football all year long. Their 2 losses have been by 6 points on last-second field goals. What's crazy about this whole thing is they could actually finish 14-2 and the 5 seed. If the Seahawks win out,
right,
if they don't handle their business in Seattle, Week 17, they could be a 14-2 on the road for the wild card game 5 seed, which is just extraordinary. There's so much good football going on.
And the Rams are roadkill on top of all of that. The Rams aren't even part of it, right?
You know,
no, they're roadkill. But
okay,
I'm in LA.
look, if you're
I've
telling
been
me
saying this from day one this season.
Great.
Go ahead.
If you're telling me it's all done and I don't need to worry about them, I want to take your word for it. But the Rams absolutely look like a team that, if they can't go to the playoffs, could be well suited to play spoiler. Let's see what they do. What do they got? Seattle this week? Like, let's see what they do there, or before the Niners have one more game against them, and that McVay is familiar with everything that Kyle Shanahan wants to do. So there could be a headache laying there. They might be dead in terms of playoffs, but Rams playing spoiler, don't count them out, not yet.
Well, spoken like a Bay Area guy, right? But David Bruce with us for 95.7 The Game, and there's no bigger cliche in football for obvious reasons. They're a hard-hitting team, or it's a hard-hitting team. But the one thing, and I can't remember the last time I noticed this, but the one thing that sticks out, and I know they've got great talent and what you talked about the front four, is the physicality of that Niners defense, to me, really sticks out. I mean, who are the guys behind that, or who are the guys on that defense that really instill that? And is there a coach, or maybe something that they didn't have last year, or something that has been injected this year? And I know they've had a good defense in the past, but has really made it a transcendent defense this year.
Yeah, well, they've got an awful lot of draft capital along that defensive line. Some of it's worked out very well. DeForest Buckner, Eric Armstead, and obviously Nick Bosa, who might be the defensive rookie of the year, if not all out and out defensive player of the year. I mean, he's got special written all over him quickly. The investment that they made in Solomon Thomas, hasn't even paid off for them. He has trouble getting on the field. Their defensive coordinator, Robert Saleh, was hailed as someone who really knew what he was doing, and the minute he would have the horses, he would prove it. I think he's lived up to that billing. I also want to say that probably the most unheralded, least told story of great football has come from Fred Warner this year. Fred Warner is in his sophomore year here in the NFL. Quan Alexander was the big free agent signing that overshadowed his development. Quan Alexander's been hurt, and Fred Warner has stepped into more responsibility and played well. He's the kid out of BYU a couple years ago, Brooks, and he's been phenomenal. And when you have sideline-to-sideline speed, when you have this type of forward push by a D-line, all of a sudden you can get creative with your safeties. Richard Sherman, God bless him, the guy keeps hanging on and doing it, coming off that Achilles from a few years ago. He's back, man. He's really, really good at this. And I thought that the league was almost setting up to make sure that a player with Richard Sherman's style in the secondary wouldn't be around very long. Now that we can review defensive pass interference, it feels like they put that in for overly physical corners, which Richard is. But he still gets away with his murder, man. He really does. He's been upset. He's been called on it a few times. But this is veteran savvy. This is gamesmanship.
Right. It's interesting. We're visiting with Damon Bruce, of course, 95.7 The Game up in the Bay Area. So we're talking about the Niners. Before we go to the Raiders, Jimmy G, and I do this all the time. I mean, we have all kinds of NFL experts and broadcasters. I just want you to give me your read on Jimmy G.
He's the best quarterback.
Go ahead.
He's the best quarterback they've had since Jeff Garcia. He is among the 10 best quarterbacks probably in the NFL right now. Those who want to say that he isn't whatever you like, people are absolutely selecting the moments they don't like to define who he is as a quarterback. He's good. I mean, he's good. Look, the position The position of quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers comes with a boatload of responsibility that the position doesn't entail in any other franchise. You got the ghosts of Montana and Steve Young standing behind you at all times, and you're being measured against the standard bearers of the position. It's almost impossible. It's suffocating. It's like being the New York Yankees shortstop. It's not going to be easy, you know? And so Jimmy is harshly judged. We live to redefine or re-rank everybody based off of every game. If this guy hadn't have been hurt last year, who knows what this would be? This is his second full year in this offense, and I think he's handled it great. I mean, if you want him to be a mutter, he can be a mutter. If you need him to make plays, he can make plays. If you need to run the ball 30 times and reduce Jimmy, he'll be the last to complain about it. I like the guy, and I think that we just live in a constantly evaluating. Way too many people play Madden. How about this? How many people who complain about Jimmy G hit the reset button on their Madden game when they throw a first quarter interception? You know what I mean?
Very good point.
So,
don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody.
Mistakes happen, even to the best of them.
Yeah.
And Jimmy is good for one mistake a game.
Right.
He's also really good at winning football games.
What is his are you seeing progress from him week to week? Are you seeing glimmers, flashes? Flashes? Is he getting better? And what is his ultimate? Nobody knows, but what's his ultimate ceiling? Is he a guy who's always going to be a Jared Goff, who's kind of a function of the offense, function of the offensive line, needs certain things to happen? All quarterbacks to an extent are like that, most of them. But is he one of those guys, or is he more of a guy? I'm not saying he's even close to Aaron Rodgers, but at least in that ballpark where he could be a guy that ends up making plays. I mean, where do you see him progressing?
Yeah, I think the more talent you put around him, like most quarterbacks, the better he's going to get. If you give him the time, he usually gets the ball out. If you give him a decent receiver, he usually completes the pass. You know, Kittle's been great. Emmanuel Sanders has been a revelation. Kendrick Bourne is a C-plus receiver who they need to depend an awful lot on because Marquise Goodwin, Dante Pettis, and these other guys haven't exactly worked out the way that they'd hoped. So Jimmy's out there doing it with very little from a playmaking standpoint on the edge. And, you know, what's his potential? I think his potential is he might win the Super Bowl this year. Like, that's pretty good, right?
So you're calling that. You think that they're a Super Bowl winning team? I mean, because that's unbelievable.
I want to drop a
look at last year. Go ahead.
I want to drop a mite. But,
well, okay.
Yeah, so here it is. I think the NFC comes down to I think it comes down to the Seahawks, the 49ers, and the Saints. Those are the teams that scare me. And those are the only two teams that scare me. And I think they beat the Vikings. I think they beat the Packers. I think they would beat whatever
Cowboys?
Comes out of the I mean, if they got to go on the road to Dallas, they're going to win that game.
Okay.
They're going to win that game. They are built to win postseason games. Will they? You know, postseason's built for things to go wrong. Who knows? Kyle Shanahan doesn't exactly close out the big game. His reputation, we all know what that is. But I'll tell you, I wouldn't trade Kyle Shanahan for his weight in gold. I think he's the best young coach in football. Now that we've done the Sean McVay beauty pageant, it's time to put the spotlight on him.
Boy, there's so much to talk about when you talk about the coaches and what's happening in LA with McVay, and now we've got Shanahan. Is he the flavor of the month? What the read on both of those teams? But now let's go over to the Raiders. And as a Chiefs guy, it has it's been amusing, the Schadenfreude. It seems like everybody couldn't wait to jump on Gruden from day one with the Raiders, but the moment they showed a glimmer, everybody got on the bandwagon, and that didn't work out so well, at least initially. So what's your read on John Gruden right now for the Raiders?
In year two, it's gone better than I think most would have expected, but they're still a painfully average and flawed football team. He's a coach that can absolutely put together an opening 15-play script. Can he be creative after halftime? Can he make the
so can Freddie Kitchens, by the way. But go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. Gruden is a better game day coach than he is a general manager. I think Mike Mayock has been a better general manager than anyone expected. They have a nucleus of young talent that they were devoid of for a really long time. I know that John Gruden falls in and out of love with quarterbacks probably faster than any other coach. And after that real flop in Kansas City, I wouldn't be surprised if Gruden isn't really looking at the rest of this schedule as Derek Carr's audition to open with his team in Vegas or not. If they moved on, I wouldn't be surprised. I really wouldn't.
I mean, what's plan B? Cam Newton, or what would they do?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, plan B, it really felt like they were taking such a good look at Kyler Murray. They were, it's odd. To try to predict the Raiders is still a fool's errand. It really is.
Okay, so in the dynamic of Davis and Mayock and Gruden, at least in what played out with Antonio Brown, I thought that was very instructive because Mayock really kind of got thrown under the bus in that whole situation.
It was good cop, bad cop.
I mean, it was an amazing story, but maybe that's what it was. Maybe it was Mayock taking one for the team, but it just came off as, to me personally, Gruden's running everything. Davis isn't running it. Mayock's not running it. Is that a good read on it? Who's really running things going
the man
forward?
with the 10-year, $100 million contract is in charge, period, and end of story. Mike Mayock is definitely there doing evaluations, but Gruden's got the final call on all of it. And I'll tell you, going back to the Niners, John Lynch has done a really nice job. Yep. This is Kyle Shanahan's show. He's got final say. Interesting.
Visiting with Damon Bruce of 95.7 The Game. Before we let you go, have to ask you about, unfortunately, the Warriors. And there really are no words. But it's
the biggest pendulum swing since Jordan left the Bulls.
Right.
I mean, I have never seen a team go from, they're pretty much penciled into the NBA Finals to number one pick in the draft. I mean, it is something else. They have the worst record in the NBA because tonight they are fielding the worst team in the NBA. It's a collection of two-way players, G Leaguers, D Leaguers, whatever the hell they're called now, rookies, a whole bunch of ain't going to be here longs, and Draymond Green, who is a great Swiss Army knife in the right situation. As soon as you ask him to be the guy, you're in an awful lot of trouble. It's extraordinary, the situation they've been painted into with the decision to sign and trade Durant for D'Angelo Russell, with the injuries that are very well documented, with Steph Curry being hurt early on in this year. It's full punt year. They admire Brooks. They admire every NBA team admires the San Antonio Spurs. And the crazy thing is they might be in position to run that equation where you do, at the end of a very good run, go back into the lottery. Now, I don't know if Tim Duncan's waiting there for you, but they could very much mirror a team that they have an awful lot of admiration for if they nail this next draft pick. I mean, the Warriors, the pendulum swung to the point where they're being asked to forfeit their national games now. ESPN's pulling them off the network. I mean, that's how bad they've become. Unwatchable, unidentifiable. Who's going to tune in to watch Lakers versus Kai Bowman, right? I mean, it's not going to happen.
Well, and this sounds like I'm being a hater. I'm not being a hater. But I just want you to, I got to ask you this because I think a lot of people see this and they're wondering, is the performance of the team at all right now? And believe me, I recognize, and you just laid it out, the lack of talent there. And there certainly are green shoots for the future. And as a guy down in Los Angeles, right in the middle of the Clippers and Lakers, God knows Lakers and Clippers fans are thinking, you know what's happening? This is a conspiracy. They're going to end up getting a first pick in the freaking, that whole thing's going on too. But what about Steve Kerr? Is what we're seeing from the Warriors at all on the court right now a reflection of him as a coach? And what's your evaluation? Or it doesn't even really matter. We know what he's done in the past, but is this a reflection of him as a coach at all?
Not at all. Not at all. And I'm not trying to be a house organ or defend someone who's a weekly guest on my show that I like very, very much personally and professionally. I think that Steve Kerr, let me just ask you, who's the greatest coach in the history of basketball? Whatever your answer is, he's got the worst record in the NBA with this team. There's no around the dearth of talent that they do. The Warriors' leading scorer is Eric Paschall. How many people in the audience watching this now can tell us where Eric Paschall went to college?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well,
Villanova, obviously, he won a national championship there, but he was a second-round pick. This team is being led by a second-round pick trying to put up 20 a night with Kai Bowman as his point guard, who's a two-way player and is going to be out of games to play the middle of next month. I mean, it's ridiculous who they have to go to battle with on a night-by-night basis. Their most consistent, steady player is Glenn Robinson III.
Yeah. Well, right.
I'm not trying to make excuses, dude, but if we all agreed that the Warriors had so much talent, it was unfair. Now they have so little talent, it's unfair.
Yeah, right. It's unprecedented. You have no words for it for once, right? I have no words, at least. Damon, I can't thank you enough, man. Keep up the good work up there, and hopefully we'll have you back on again soon, man. Thank you.
Anytime, pal. It's great to talk to you. I mean it, man. You have been a huge part of my sporting existence for decades. I mean, going back to the old website, man, you're one of the OGs. It's a pleasure to join you as always. Best to you.
Likewise. That's Damon Bruce of 95.7 The Game in the Bay Area. He is amazing. How about that? A lot of analysis, a lot of insight, a guy who's making his living off watching Jimmy G. That's who I want to talk to. Because as a guy who's, doing national stuff here in LA, I'm watching Jimmy G, and he's on a lot now, so you get a chance but I'm not sitting there breaking him down. That's why I love having Orlovsky on yesterday, where that needs to happen more often. If somebody knows what they're talking, we had Jardy on today from the NFL Network, and that guy's plugged in. Just give someone the name of somebody like Sam Darnold and let Dan Orlovsky tell you what he thinks, because he's already thought of it, because that's what he does. Now, in certain cases, you're going to set up a question, and God knows I know I filibuster, Jesus. But this is a conversational show, and I'm going to be having a conversation with you on the fan line. You can click on that icon on the screen. Coming up, we're going to be visiting with Bruce Hooley. We're going to go up to Columbus, Ohio, and talk to him. How about this show, by the way? Unbelievable. NFL all over the place. And now we're going to go to Columbus, talk to Bruce Hooley. Coming up, we're going to be going to Tulsa to talk to Oklahoma guy, RJ Young, who's on top of the Oklahoma State, K-State, Big 12 situation. We're going to get that perspective as well. So we're covering everything in terms of the college football playoff rankings, but we're also talking about coaching vacancies. And we have that exclusive. If you're just tuning in and you're a USC fan, or you just care because you're a college football fan like me, I've learned today that offensive coordinator Graham Harrell of USC has interviewed for 2 head coaching vacancies this week. One of them is Texas San Antonio. There's also that possibility that's been reported out there that he could go to Texas as the offensive coordinator under Tom Herman. But regardless, Graham Harrell's out of USC. He's gone. So now you've got a USC team that's going to lose the guy who a lot of people ascribe their offensive success this year to, and Keaton Slova's success too. They've had a great year offensively, USC. There's no denying that. Much more consistent than what we saw with JT Daniels, the anointed one from Clay Helton last year and the beginning of this year. But now that guy's gone. All right. And USC is staring down the barrel of a historically bad recruiting class right now. It's funny because nobody seems to bring that up. I mean, a few people do, but and if you're a dyed-in-the-wool USC fan out here in Los Angeles, you look at the Coliseum behind me, right? If you're a dyed-in-the-wool Cardinal and gold guy, you know that, right? But, I mean, there's so many things. If they are going to keep Clay Helton, I just can't express this enough. You have to be here, but not just be here. You have to know people who are close to the program, right? And to know people who are dealing in this coaching situation from different angles, parties, places, how they're being communicated with by USC, to understand that I get that they want to turn over a new leaf, and they should at USC. For God's sake, absolutely. But this is awful start in the way that they're handling this. Now, I don't know if there's been an announcement while I've been on the air. I'm sitting here waiting to see what's going to happen. My phone keeps going off. And let's see here. By the way, do you have Bruce Hooley? Cam Smith is our producer. Do you have Bruce Hooley's information, Cam? Do we need to get in touch with him? Did I give you that information? Do you have that? Okay, good. Just making sure. But this is the kind of thing that I've been led to believe there's going to be some information coming out here shortly about the USC situation. I'd like to think there would be. There was a team meeting yesterday with the team, and it was a pre-scheduled meeting. This was not to call the team together to make an announcement. And Helton, I've been told by a very good source with direct knowledge, is recruiting today. He's working on that 63rd or 70th or 77th ranked recruiting class. USC. I mean, whoever you are watching this show right now within the sound of my voice, you could recruit the 77th best group of players at USC. USC recruits itself. I don't care what anybody says. It does. And if you're year after year losing players to not just teams in the area, UCLA or Pac-12 teams, but teams all the way across the country, it's not just the recruiting services. That's part of it. But if I can guarantee you, if you put somebody like Urban Meyer here, and I'm not advocating for Urban Meyer by any means, and if you put him here, they would have the number one recruiting class in the country within 2 years. And they would be in the college football playoff in 2 years, if not earlier. No, why is that? You want to know why? Because Urban Meyer breaks his ass on recruiting, his own 24. That really is the difference. And the guys that work for him, break their ass for him, are devoted to him. That's how it works. I'm trying to remember the name of the guy who, I mean, did you see the Tom Herman thing where he headbutted the player before the Baylor game 2 weeks ago? We played that video for you. That sort of mentality, that crazy mentality, that is something that Urban Meyer, and we're going to talk about this with Bruce Hooley coming up. And it's fortuitous that we're going to have Bruce on because nobody is plugged into Ohio State football more than Bruce, who's covered it for decades, covered it for big newspapers, has had the number one sports radio talk show, Morning Drive, co-hosting with Chris Spielman for years in Columbus. You talk about plugged in, someone who knows these things. I want to get his read on Ryan Day, what he thinks, because I think the jury's still out. I mean, people look at me like I'm crazy. I'm not crazy. When you have a schedule like that and you have a Big Ten that's as crappy as it is, who's to say? But one thing I think that, and Bruce is actually the guy, Bruce Hooley, who tipped me off to the possibility that Urban Meyer potentially down the road could succeed Ryan Day as the head coach at Ohio State. And Urban Meyer has invoked Mac Brown in the past to people he knows, and in the context of Brown going to North Carolina. So don't be surprised at all about that if that eventually happens, if Day ends up going to the NFL. I'm not talking about him moving on and getting fired or anything. I'm talking about the NFL. But getting back to SC. So that's the situation. You're going to lose this guy, Harold. I'm not saying that's catastrophic for Helton, but maybe I am. I mean, it's hard to know what's going to happen to the offense. Slovis looks like a amazing player who you just don't want to get too excited about. But when I was talking about if you're here and you're plugged into the culture around USC, which I am and have been for many years, because that was one of my first jobs working with USC for several years on the broadcast and every day, I can tell you that there's not much Clay Helton's going to be able to do, including going to the college football playoff, that would satisfy prominent alumni, whether it's donors like Wayne Hughes or chairman of the board of trustees, Rick Caruso, or former players like Marcus Allen, Rodney Peete, those kinds of guys. If you don't know, and you probably don't know unless you're really plugged in, guys like Rodney Peete, not Keyshawn Johnson, Rodney Peete, Marcus Allen, they are the movers and the shakers among the alumni football players. And there has been a groundswell. I'm not going to talk about anyone specifically in this vein. I'm not necessarily referring to those guys. There has been a groundswell at USC surrounding the program to hire an African-American coach. There's been a lot of talk about that. Now, I haven't seen any candidates out there besides Tony Elliott, Clemson, who would fit the bill there. Well, actually, James Franklin would. What am I talking about? James Franklin would. And James Franklin is the guy that I'm not coming off of yet. I know a lot of you are tuned in today to hear a mea culpa on that. You're not going to hear it. And the reason you're not going to hear it is right before I went on the show, I talked to somebody who's involved with one of the candidates, and they haven't been told yet. So if it happens, it happens. Fine. They come out and confirm it, but I'm not so sure they're going to. We'll have to wait and see. So now let's bring up Bruce Hooley from Columbus, major expert, of course, on Ohio State, journalist, as good as it gets, Sports Illustrated, Cleveland Plain Dealer, and longtime Morning Drive ratings and revenue maven, if you will. Bruce Hooley. Bruce, man, thanks for jumping on, man. I appreciate your patience.
Oh, my pleasure. Sorry to have a little technical issues. I'm sure it's on my end.
So what's your thought about what's going on with the Buckeyes right now and coming out of Michigan? Was that an indication? Was that something that told us something different about Ohio State that we didn't already know?
No, I don't think so. I think it told us more, Brooks, about Michigan and just how far away they are. You know, last year it's 62-39, and that's sort of a wow moment. Like, whoa, they put 62 on us. Well, 56 isn't as eye-opening as 62, but 56-27 is a bigger margin than 62-39. And when you think about the fact that it's a big margin the year after Ohio State lost Urban Meyer, a quarterback who threw 6 touchdown passes against Michigan,
right?
Two receivers who caught 3 of those 6 touchdowns, and a third, Terry McLaurin, who's starring as a rookie in the NFL. Their leading rusher in the game, Mike Weber, who had a touchdown, and 4 offensive linemen are gone off that team that beat Michigan 62-39. And they put up 56, and really they took their foot off the gas late in the game because I think they didn't want to score 63. Just why give Michigan that off-season motivation? And oh, by the way, you lost Urban Meyer, and you still beat them worse. So I think it told us more about Michigan than Ohio State. Ohio State is who we thought they were. They're a really good football team offensively and defensively.
I just had David Bruce on from the Bay Area, 95.7 The Game, and I invoked the Golden State Warriors right now, and I said there really are no words for Michigan. To me, there really are no words right now for what's happening. Now it sounds like they're 0-11, but in the context of Michigan and the expectations that I think Jim Harbaugh himself has built up, it was really stark to see what appears to be a vast difference in talent between Michigan and Ohio State. And is that what that is, or is there coaching there? I mean, what do you see specifically with Michigan as the problem right now that they could be that non-competitive?
It is a talent issue. I mean, when you look at the number of guys Ohio State has drafted year in and year out, and you look at the number of guys, particularly skill position offensive guys that Michigan has drafted, it's not close. And I think Harbaugh needs a transformative player. And if I will say this, I've been covering the Big Ten for 25 years. Nothing has surprised me more than his lack of competitiveness in this rivalry. Now, it's overstated somewhat. 0-5 is 0-5. He was real close to winning this game in Columbus in 2016, a 4th and inches spot away. He was also very close to winning this game in 2017 up in Michigan. It was 24-20, and he didn't have a quarterback who could take advantage of the schematic edges that he got Michigan that day. It was miraculous they were in that game. But I will say that his failure to get a quarterback is why he is where he is in this rivalry. And what's really mystifying is you'd think Jim Harbaugh, with Andrew Luck on his resume, his own NFL pedigree, would be able to get any quarterback who wants to get to the league that he that he would recruit. But he's made do at Michigan largely with transfer quarterbacks, with Jake Rudick from Iowa, with John O'Corn from Houston, now with Shea Patterson from Ole Miss. He can't find or recruit or develop a quarterback. Dylan McCaffrey was all that coming out of Colorado. Dylan McCaffrey if he was all that, would already be starting at Michigan. So you got to get the quarterback position right. They don't have running backs. They don't have dominant offensive linemen, although they did do a very nice job against Chase Young. And those are the things, that's his area of expertise. If you'd have told me that he'd come to Michigan after the way he won at Stanford, after the way he won with the 49ers.
It's unbelievable.
Physically dominating opponents. Mm-hmm. He can't physically dominate opponents in the Big Ten, and they're a run-of-the-mill good Big Ten team. They're a 9-3 Big Ten team, which is better than they were under Hoke and Rich Rod. He's won more games than those two guys combined in less time, so he's not a failure, but there are levels to developing your program. You got to get out of ineptitude. That's a jump. So he's done that. You got to get to the level next where, you're the best team in your division, and that's a quantum leap from where he is right now because Ohio State is so good.
Visiting with Bruce Hooley, Sports Illustrated, and you've got, of course, the podcast now with Chris Spielman. Describe that podcast. What's going on with that?
Yeah, our tagline on the podcast is "We Tackle Life." So essentially, it's a podcast a lot about Ohio State football, a lot about the NFL because of Chris's role on as a Fox analyst on the NFL, but also the last 5 to 7 minutes, we try to apply our Christian faith to life and help guys who are interested in that aspect of their life maybe see some things that are similar about their lives to our lives and help provide some encouragement in that area.
That's really cool. So we've got Bruce Hooley on the line with us from Columbus. Now let's talk about Ohio State. And you kind of already answered this question to a certain extent. But what do you say to people who say, well, that's Urban Meyer's team that we're watching. It's not Ryan Day. What do you say to those people?
Well, it's Urban Meyer's talent. There's no doubt about that. Ryan Day wouldn't dispute that. But I would tell you, and it was very evident early in the year, this team is coached differently than they were coached under Urban Meyer. And when I say that, Brooks, a lot of people think it's a knock on Urban Meyer. It's not. How could you knock a guy who has 3 national titles? But there's a way that he coached. It's similar to the way Nick Saban coaches. It's a product of the era that they were brought up in and that they coached in. It's a more what have you done for me today? It's a more Darwinian culture, a more survival of the fittest kind of a thing.
Right.
It's I'm going to grind you and grind you and grind you and grind you and, unleash the hounds on Saturday afternoon. Ryan Day's different. Ryan Day's a younger guy. He's 40 years old. He's gone to leadership seminars. He's read leadership books. One of the things he said early in the year that tipped me the fact that this guy's a different cat when it comes to coaching, he said, I want to achieve correction without creating resentment. Now, how many football coaches from the old school have you heard worry about whether they're creating resentment or not in their players?
Woody Hayes.
Yeah, this doesn't happen, right? So he's clearly read some Stephen Covey books or some leadership books, or he's been impacted by great leaders, and he applies that the way he coaches a team. And so I have dubbed it, he's the perfect coach for this team at this time. Now, a lot of people think when you make a switch from an Urban Meyer icon to a new coach, you're going to be able to tell if it falls apart in year one. I'd ask people to go back to Larry Coker at Miami, and everything was fine for a year.
Mike Archer at LSU.
Yeah, for a year in every game but the last one at Miami in year 2. And I'm not suggesting Ryan Day is Larry Coker. I actually think Ryan is a really sharp guy and is going to be a great coach at Ohio State for as long as he wants to be, and in the NFL as soon as he wants to be. But I'm saying the problem that Ryan will have is maintaining the culture 3 and 4 years out when the guys who remember how it was when the Wicked Witch of the West was in the building, and if you stepped out of line, you got crushed. That's when that's when those guys filter out, and all the guys in your building know is the new, kinder, gentler, chest bumping everybody way. That's when keeping that toughness, keeping that attention to detail becomes harder.
Well, I think the big question in all of that, and that's really the question in college football, and I think to a certain extent it has kind of changed, what Urban Meyer brought to the Big Ten and what he and I think Nick Saban and maybe Dabo Swinney have done that has changed the way college football is run in terms of individual teams that creates this transcendent success is Urban Meyer himself devotes 24/7 and demands that of all of his assistants on recruiting and using the NFL as a carrot to recruit. And through that, I think he creates that leverage perhaps with his team. When you have that much talent, that much competition, and then you win a lot, you're able to get away with that sort of leadership style that he does. Do you think Ryan Day is going to be able to achieve that level of talent that's so transcendent that brought Ohio State to just a different place? Even in Ohio State, that's amazing.
I think he will in the short term because, you look at this year's draft, Chase Young's going to go high. Jeff Okuda is going to go high. I think Sean Wade will come out early and go high. They're going to have 3 or 4 first rounders this year. And, that is pretty much what kids look at. Tradition is 3 years old, really, in college football now. And so as long as he continues that, but if that ever wanes, then that's when you'll start to see some differences. But he's a very fun guy to play for. He's got an outstanding staff. The thing I notice about his staff, when his defensive coordinator, Jeff Hafley, stands up and talks, his linebackers coach, his quarterbacks coach, Al Washington and Mike Yursich, you would say to yourself, if you were just thrown into that room, you had no idea what these guys do, you'd say, well, I'm talking to a guy who's a mid-30s to early 40s successful businessman who's running a multi-million-dollar corporation. They're charismatic guys. They're smart guys. They'd be successful at whatever they're doing, even if it weren't football. Now, he's got some old, embattled, grizzled football guys on the staff. Greg Madison, who's been at Notre Dame, Florida, and Michigan. He's got Larry Johnson, the great defensive line coach from Penn State and Ohio State for the last 10 years or so. So he's got a mix, but he's got those young guys that relate to young players, and that's why I think they're going to recruit at an elite level for a while because, Urban set him up, and Ryan's keeping it rolling, and at least right now in the short term, no signs of it diminishing anyway.
What is and we've talked about this, I think a couple of times you've been on the show in the past, and I wonder if it's changed at all, but for people who didn't see you earlier when you're on the show, what's your read on Urban Meyer's future?
I always thought getting back in 2020 was too soon. I think 2021 is a lot more plausible. Although I will say I can't imagine the inner turmoil in Urban if he could have had his choice between the USC Trojans and the Dallas Cowboys this year. I don't know. You're the guy dialed in on USC, and it's kind of shocking to me they're keeping Helton, but I wonder if Mike Bone might be keeping Helton because he can't get the guy or one of the 2 guys that he wants. I actually thought James Franklin would be his fallback. But why don't you educate me on USC and where they stand? I know Urban has always been intrigued by USC. I would be very surprised if his wife fought him on moving to LA because I think she'd love the Hollywood culture.
Right.
The question for Urban will be, can he take with him some guys from Ohio State who Ryan Day has kept who are essential to their success? Guys nobody's heard of. They're not assistant coaches. They're support guys. They're strength guys. But those are the guys that have been with Urban since Utah, some of them since Bowling Green. And I'm not saying he wouldn't take a job if he can't get 1 or 2 of those guys, but if he could get all 3 of those guys, he'd be all in my opinion, the year, in 2021 or soon after that.
Before I answer that or tell you what I'm thinking about Urban Meyer and I see, what about Ryan Day in the NFL? Do you think that could be an imminent thing? Could it happen before next year? Or are there teams interested? Is it possible? And if that were to happen, could Urban go back to Ohio State?
I think there are teams interested. I think it's like Urban going back into coaching. It's too soon for Ryan to leave Ohio State. I don't think he wants that to be his epitaph. It was a 1 year out, used him as a stepping stone to the NFL. Although, Brooks, having said that, it's the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, how many times does that job come open? If it is the Dallas Cowboys, I think that's really hard for him to say no to.
You're talking about Ryan Day?
I'm just saying that would be a tough one to say no to.
The Browns.
No, that wouldn't be a tough one to say no to because that one's open every.
Right.
But I think long range, and again, I don't want people to report that I'm saying that he's going to the Dallas Cowboys. I'm just saying that'd be a real tough decision. If you ask me my gut feeling is a very highly motivated young guy like Ryan Day, who's going to be in the college football playoff this year, may win it, is well positioned to be in it again next year. It would surprise me more if he's still at Ohio State in 5 years, than it would if he's in the NFL in 5 years. I think that's eventually all these guys want to challenge themselves at the highest level, and that's the highest level.
I still firmly believe Urban Meyer's not coming to SC. I don't think anything's changed beyond the fact that Carol Folt, what's playing out right now is really amazing, because I think what we're seeing is Carol Folt, the president at USC, is really asserting power here. She came in from North Carolina to clean house. She's done it. But one of the key things that has taken place, and this is the power base of the alumni who decides who the athletic director is, who decides who the head coach is. That's how it works at SC more than any school you know. The whale donors, they run the board of trustees. Rick Caruso is a billionaire developer, and Wayne Hughes also is on the board of trustees. That's why Al Cowling's name is on a dormitory right now at USC. He is. So what's happening here is you've got an internal power struggle between the old guard and the people who decide what happens in football. And those guys, specifically Rick Caruso, before Mike Bohn ever got here, Rick Caruso, who is the chairman of the board of trustees, a billionaire, he's been canvassing and talking to representatives of prospective coaching candidates. And so by the time Bohn gets here, they've already got some people in place they want to take a look at. Meantime, you've got Carol Folt, and she's saying it's all about appearance and propriety. She's firing a lot of people, but the key moment, I think, in trying to assess, is she going to win out? Will she have the power to perhaps block an Urban Meyer from getting hired? Was when we found out they have changed the rules, Bruce, of the board of trustees, and they have put an age limit on the board of trustees, and they put term limits on the board of trustees, which is extraordinary for SC. SC has, this is amazing, but they've got dozens and dozens and dozens of members of the board of trustees. It's really a ceremonial post as much as it is you're there in the meetings and things. It's not really like that at USC. It's how much money do you have, and we'll give you this title. Well, Carol Folt has thrown that out the window. And one of those trustees, who's probably the most influential at USC and has been for many years, he's kind of the Les Wexner of SC, is Wayne Hughes, the founder of Public Storage. He's in his 80s. And when you put an age limit on the board of trustees, you're making a statement, and that's coming from Carol Folt. So I think she's in charge. I think one of the issues you've got is Clay Helton right now. That's a disaster if you bring him back for so many different reasons. They're going to lose their offensive coordinator. They have a historically bad recruiting class that Clay Helton is out there right now. I have a source telling me, Bruce, today he's out there recruiting right now. We've got people still saying that, and there's been 2 years of speculation that Helton's going to be gone. You can guarantee some of the coaches who are USC's opponents are telling recruits today, well, you don't know if he's going to be there, right? That's there. Yeah. USC is not providing any clarity yet. I wouldn't be surprised if we still don't definitively know if he's coming back next year. And I'm also waiting on James Franklin, because Franklin, in my opinion, if anybody's going to replace Clay Helton, it's going to be him. Yeah. I think we want to watch, and for all I know, it's happened while we talked. Watch Franklin's contract situation. If he gets an extension at Penn State, and I've heard they've been discussing that, if that happens, I think there's a very good chance Helton will come back. But until that happens, I think and I don't think Urban's going to be part of it. And I think it is a function of Carol Folt asserting this power.
Well, it's always been my experience, and I certainly don't have any insides at all at USC. You know, kudos to her if she can keep the academics first. But I had a university president tell me a long time ago, more presidents are fired over athletics and hospitals than anything else. And it's a lot easier to find a university president than it is to find a national championship caliber football coach.
Man, I really can't thank you enough for bringing us Ohio State and your patience with us, working with us here on Fancred today and coming on the show. Thanks so much, Bruce.
Always a pleasure, man. All the best.
That's Bruce Hooley, who, of course, is with Sports Illustrated. He's got the podcast with Chris Spielman, and nobody knows Ohio State football better than Bruce Hooley. Now we're going to go to Oklahoma. We're going to go to Tulsa, and we're going to get some Big 12 stuff going on, because right now, to me, Oklahoma is that situation with the Sooners is as intriguing and as important to the future of what's going to happen this season in college football as anything. RJ Young joins us. RJ, how you doing?
I'm getting there, Brooks. You doing okay, buddy?
I'm doing great. I love your studio, by the way.
Thank you.
It's the cool and so tell people, first of all, you've got a radio talk show that you do weekdays in Tulsa, but what about your YouTube channel? How can people find you on YouTube? Because what you do shows almost every day on YouTube, right?
Yeah. It's my time. It's our time. It's college football time. So the upload goes up quite a few bits in December, November as we get toward the end of our regular season. If you search my name, the channel comes up. I mean, but the channel is because people like what I've done and they've liked me doing it on a piece of cardio equipment from some time ago. And that's actually how I ended up with the sports talk show on The Animal in Tulsa, 97.1 FM. Yeah, I'm riding the wave, dude.
Right.
Lead as it is.
So it's RJ_ Young, and
No,
that's on
Twitter.
Twitter. That's
Yeah.
Twitter, but they can just do RJ Young on YouTube, and there you are.
Yeah, I think there's me and like a rapper. It's like Young RJ or something. I
Yeah,
don't know. Yeah, I want my name back because like I can't get it on Twitter and it kind of bugs me.
yeah.
Then again,
How many times have
there's
I
a lot
heard
of
that,
people
by the
on
way?
Twitter.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, hey man, give me one of those check marks. Let's go. Come on.
So forget about that. And I think before too long, that's not going to matter. I wouldn't be
Okay.
surprised if we go back to the way it was. But it's a testament. I mean, everything you're just describing is based on merit and persistence and consistency, and it's a testament to your abilities. And that's why we're talking to you right now. And Oklahoma right now is in the middle of everything when it comes to the conversation about, at least for me, because I'm always interested in, okay, who's in, who's out, and why. And so I wanted to run this by you on the college football playoff rankings, that if you look at the bottom 5 of the coaches and the AP poll, they're identical, and they do not include Oklahoma State or Kansas State in that top 25. But in the college football playoff rankings, Oklahoma State is still hanging on right at number 25. Do you think the fact that Oklahoma State is not in the AP or coaches poll, nor is Kansas State, that perhaps the committee might be trying to manipulate things to a certain extent to keep Oklahoma and Baylor perhaps in play as we move towards this final week?
No, I think it's their poll. It's whatever they want to do with it. Now, if they want to use the back end of their rankings to justify the front end of the rankings, which is what I think goes on, then we need to let that happen because those folks are picked and appointed and they rotate in, they rotate out. And as we're told over and over again, there's 13 of them. They all have 13 agendas, or so we're told they don't have. But also, not all 13 are in the room at the same time because most of these folks have backgrounds from these universities. Like, for instance, Frank Beamer has to leave the room because his son coaches at Oklahoma. Joe Constiglione has to leave the room because he's the athletic director.
But they could
at
twist
Oklahoma.
arms. They could in the cocktail hour, right? I think that's the whole point, right?
Who can twist your arm, Brooks? Who
Well,
can twist your arm?
Well, Castiglione, if you're
No. You personally, who can twist your arm?
Well,
Your
I
wife?
mean,
Right? Significant
yeah.
other?
I mean,
You're-
friends,
you know,
people that
yeah.
you know.
Well, no, I don't know about
Contemporaries.
friends. I don't know about
Peers.
friends. I don't know. I got a little bit of a rod in my back. I know what I know. You're not going to sway me based on what I know. Like, for instance, let me put it this way. With Jalen Hurts, right? I'm very out in front saying he can't see it. He's got a problem throwing to this part of the field. He just can't do it. And his passer efficiency numbers were such that people were like, yo, man, it seems like Lincoln Riley can teach him how to do this. And I was going, okay, cool. Against UCLA, who's trash? Fine. South Dakota, who's trash? Fine. Whatever. Houston, who's turned out to be trash? Okay. Then you get into the really, really nutty part of the Big 12 schedule, for which there are 4 top 50 defenses. And what do? They all back off of him, and he can't see it. So now you have what Mike Gundy called a wishbone quarterback. Point there is, I know what I know, right? Just like I think most of the people in that room know what they know. Now, how the rankings fall out, do we really argue about that? Yes, because it matters for media guides. It matters for what you tell recruits. For instance, I thought Army should have been a top 25 team in this playoff ranking last year, and they got the shaft. I don't know why they got the shaft, because they had losses to Duke and a double overtime loss to a team that played in the college football playoff, and then they hung 70 on Houston.
Oklahoma.
Right. So there's that, right? But I also understand that if you want to tell people that USC is in this poll because they beat Utah, then you're also going to tell people Utah's in this poll because they beat Washington, because they beat Arizona State.
Who have they beaten?
Well, I mean, that's kind of the point here, right? And then they have this piece of the criteria that says unequivocally better. And I'm waiting on Mullen to come out with the definition for unequivocally better, because I'm not sure even he knows. Because the only team I think fits this definition, 2017 Alabama, unequivocally better. We put them in the playoff. We were right because they beat those teams. This year, it would be Clemson for me. Like, let's say for whatever reason, Virginia.
Ohio State.
Well, also, right? But
Right.
I'm saying Clemson because people want to look at their schedule and tell me that their schedule sucks. Whereas with Ohio State, we would say Penn State, we would say Michigan, we would say the only team in the top 25 to play a bunch of FBS teams. Every team on their schedule is an FBS opponent. And by the way, 4 of those teams are playing in conference championships this weekend. So I honestly think that Ohio State could have been the first 2-loss team to get in. It would have been a move, but they could have been based on what you know about this team. Because I also look at them and say they got 3 legitimate Heisman finalists on that team, and who else can say that? You get 2, you're really good. You're number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6. You get 3, you're Ohio State, and they're the only people that occupy that position. So as far as what the committee is thinking about doing, people are people. But if you're going to tell me that people get swayed when other people come back in the room because they get their arms twisted, I'm gonna fight you.
Well, it just depends on how the booze is flowing, because you got the scotch and you've got the salty snacks and you've got
If you
Frank
have
Peter hanging
alcohol
out.
while you are deciding the fates
Come
of
on.
these teams,
Who are we? It's a country club is what we're talking about.
well, and that I am not here for the royalist. That's not who I
No.
am. I mean,
Well,
you.
I wish you
all
were.
accurately said how I got to you, right? How am I
Right.
going to
Eric.
ride for a bunch of people that get to ride into a country club, tell me how things are going to go? I'm going to burn the place down.
I want you to tell me about this Oklahoma team and the defense on Oklahoma. Which defense is it? Does Oklahoma deserve, if they beat, are they going to beat Baylor, and do they deserve to be in the college football playoff?
If they beat Baylor, deserving is out the window. If Baylor beats them, deserving is out the window. What does Utah do? What does
So
Utah do? And before that, what did Georgia do? Because if Georgia beats LSU, it's a moot
No
point.
argument.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
So we're assuming that LSU beats Georgia, and we're assuming that Utah loses to Oregon.
Well, even if Utah beats Oregon, let's say OU's your squad. So let's stick with OU right now. OU wins and Utah wins. What's the case for Oklahoma getting in? And I think the case really is, a big part of it is, are they going to be able to play an Ohio State close or an LSU close in the first round of the college football playoff? Is that the Oklahoma team? Because to me, that would merit them getting in.
No, I think the argument is
Evaluate that team.
which one of those teams is going to play the closest, because neither one of them is going to play them close. Like, I'm on record with this. Oklahoma get housed in the college football playoff.
Really?
I don't trust them. I don't trust them. I hate putting Oklahoma and Notre Dame in the same sentence, but that's what it is. You get them in there on name recognition and on resume.
They're that level this year, because they're not like that every year.
When is the last time that we felt really good about them going into the playoff? It was 2017, right? When they had a 17-point lead against Georgia, lost that. They were the matchup for that Alabama team. They could have beat that Alabama team. This team is not that team. This team is not that good, right? It defensively ain't that bad either, right? But that's what you're banking on. But when you're looking at Utah, everything depends on what Tyler Huntley and Zach Moss can do, and you're saying that Morgan Scalley's defense is going to show up. Same defense that gave up 351 through the air to Matt Fink, who's the 4th-string quarterback, not the 3rd,
Right.
but 4th.
Not Slovis.
Right. So when we talk about the resume and we talk about the branding and we talk about which team is going to be able to keep up, you look at the offenses, you're going to give Oklahoma the edge. You look at the defense, you're going to give Utah the edge. You look at the resume, you have to give Oklahoma the edge. So it really is, what metrics do they take into account? And if they stick to the thing that I thought they were going to stick to, which is quality wins, right? Oklahoma has better quality wins. You beat a 1-loss team twice, right? You gave them their first loss. You beat an Oklahoma State team that y'all ranked. And I think that's also covered for them if they want to move.
That's my whole point.
Right.
That's my whole point. The fix is in.
Cool. Then we agree.
Right. No, we do. I mean, I agree. I think that the committee's doing everything they can to facilitate OU and Baylor. That's for sure. They're doing everything they can.
Doing everything they can to facilitate having options, which is what I would do. I would have those teams stacked together because I want the option to pick one or the other based on what happens this weekend.
So we're up against the clock, but I got one more for you. Tom Herman. By the way, I'm hearing that I want to give you this tidbit. I reported it today on the show. Graham Harrell has interviewed for 2 head coaching positions this week. One of them, I don't know both. One of them is Texas San Antonio. But
Okay.
of course, it's out there as well that he could end up as an offensive coordinator, perhaps with Herman. That's kind of a hard sell on me. Maybe it could happen. I don't know. But what's your read on Tom Herman? What's the future of Tom Herman at Texas?
Oh man. Well, this is the year, man. This is the year that either Jackie Sherrill shows up and cuts the nuts off the bull, or you get it together because.
Well, he tried.
No, like this is year 4, right? This is what it is. Right. So I think what this is also going to point to me is if you go get a guy like Graham Harrell, he is not sharing play calling duties with you. And you're going away from your vaunted power spread, the thing that you love, the thing that puts you on the map at Ohio State, the thing you won a national championship with. So you would have to move into the CEO role, right? And let Graham Harrell just run it. Also tell Tim Beck, sit down. I'm a quarterback's coach. He might not have a job. So if Graham Harrell does get that job, there's going to be so much moving and shaking that Tom is going to say, no, I'm about winning. I'm not about my guys.
So Tom's not voluntarily going to do that. Somebody else is going to have to tell Tom to do
then
that.
You're not going to get Graham Harrell.
Right. I'm saying that if Graham Harrell ends up there, we will know that Tom has relinquished some of his power, his leverage. Is that the case?
I would think so, because my understanding of Tom Herman is he's another guy with a lot of rod in his back. He's going to do it his way. So for you to tell him how it's going to be ain't really going to fly. So I think he would just go get another coordinator, like say Rhett Lashley at SMU that runs something similar to what he runs. But Lashley would also fight you about play calling, right? So,
right.
But with the UTSA thing, I would tell Graham to stay put. Just don't take that job. Don't be a head coach over there. Not yet.
Yeah, I do think that Harold's going to go somewhere because I don't think he wants to be at SC. And that's just we get to talk for an hour about USC. I already have, but I wish we had more time. We'll have you back on, man. I really appreciate it. Thank you for coming on.
I appreciate you, Brooks. No, this is a lot of fun.
That's RJ Young, of course, from Oklahoma, giving us the rundown on what's going on with the Oklahoma Sooners. Great discussion about Oklahoma and Baylor, Oklahoma State college football playoffs. Very opinionated guy. And check him out on YouTube. Just search RJ Young. His videos are freaking awesome, but they're breaking college football down. And follow him on Twitter. I don't recommend people on Twitter very often, just the people off the air per se. But it's RJ_Young. You got to follow that guy on Twitter. He's freaking amazing. Really good follow. Unbelievable show. Great job. This is when you have a producer who knows what the hell he's doing. I would never schedule this number of guests. And they're all great guests, obviously, today, covering current events as we have today. We've been everywhere today. But you can't do it without an unbelievable producer in Cam Smith at Fancred and our support folks at Fancred. Unbelievable job to put this show on. This show is amazing. And we gave you a lot of information today about USC. You heard me mention it to RJ. If you're just tuning in, I mentioned James Franklin yesterday as the guy who will replace Clay Helton. And I don't know what to say right now. Let's wait. Let's see. Unless something's happened while I'm on the air right now, let's just chill right now. Let's chill and see what happens. Put it this way. You've got Carol Fold. You got Mike Bone. This is an unprecedented news situation. So let's just chill. And we'll see you back here tomorrow. Come back. See you tomorrow. 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern time. For our producer, Cam Smith, the folks at Fancred, this is Brooks Melchior saying so long. This has been Sports by Brooks on Fancred.